Tonight is Tuesday, December 8th, 2020. I'd like to welcome you to a special meeting of the Fitchburg City Council and call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. At this point, I will lead the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. Wait for our flag here. FATV, do we? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, could you please conduct the roll call?
The following councilors have logged in and are present at tonight's meeting. President Kuchmarek, Councilor Boschman, Councilor Kucher, Councilor DiNatale, Councilor Fleming, Councilor Schultz, Councilor Squalia, Councilor Van Hazinga, Councilor Walsh, and Councilor Zarella.
Councilor Zarella, with a motion relative to remote participation.
Move that we suspend all rules of this body and/or our parliamentary authority, which are in conflict with either the remote participation format or the state guidance and guidelines regarding remote participation during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Second.
And roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
Yeah.
Councilor
Yes.
Kucher. Thank you. Councilor Kucher,
Yes.
Councilor DiNatale,
Yes.
Councilor Fleming,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz,
Yes.
Councilor Squalia,
Councilor, was that a yes?
She's muted. You're muted, Sam.
Yay.
thank you. Councilor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Councilor Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
That is 10-0.
Now, the warrant for a special meeting of the Fitchburg City Council. Special meeting of the City Council will be held on Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, immediately following the regular Finance Committee meeting, which is scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. via Zoom meeting platform. The agenda will consist of the following this evening. The first and only item, hearing and taxation of property according to use in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 797 of the Acts of 1979, as amended by Chapter 79 of the Acts of 1983. Per order, Michael P. Kuchmarek, President of the City Council. And I would like to now declare the hearing open and invite our city assessor team with Christopher Paquette and Harold Chide to lead us through their presentation. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
The floor is yours.
Unmuted. I'd like to open up with a few remarks. I'll be followed by my colleague, Chris Paquette, will be talking about valuations. After he concludes, I'll talk a little bit about property taxes in general and property tax levies, leading up to a discussion around the ultimate goal of this hearing tonight, which is to set a tax rate or tax rates. And then, of course, entertain any questions that the City Council might have. This has been obviously a very interesting year. Our efforts as assessors, like the work of any department within the city, confounded a bit by COVID. In an environment where conducting inspections is a challenge and where certain precautions have to be taken, it's been a bit of a challenge, but we're glad to say that we are coming to you having concluded all of our work including the revaluation of all of the properties in town. That revaluation effort is mandated by both state law and the Department of Revenue. And at the heart of our annual revaluation is the goal of adjusting our assessed valuations to bring them into line with the market. The market in Fitchburg, like surrounding communities, has actually been quite strong for most property classes. I want to just point out that the base year that we look at in establishing our values for fiscal year 2021 is calendar year 2019 sales and other market evidence. 2019 obviously predated COVID and reflected really a very strong market. And so next year's valuations will embrace whatever COVID has brought us in the way of market dynamics that need to then be accounted for. Although I might just comment, in spite of COVID, most real estate values are holding strong, and that is encouraging. We hope that that continues. There are certain subclasses of property that we're looking at very closely, and we'll be monitoring, especially the office sector and the retail sector. But with that, I'll turn over the session to my colleague, Chris Paquette, and he'll give you some highlights about where property valuations are traveling.
Thank you, Gerald. So as Gerald said, it's been kind of an interesting year with, what we've all been going through, such as the reason why we don't get to travel and see you at the typical meeting space. My annual year in review for tax classification purposes starts a little bit like this. So this year, the city's growth stayed strong. We had more growth than we were expecting, and that's a good thing for a year like this. We added over $49 million in taxable value to growth. That's things that didn't exist last year that, were picked up this year. The city still received its largest portion of growth from personal property. However, it's important to note that this year's growth was more evenly shared between residential and industrial property. Commercial property wasn't as great as it was in years past. However, in years past, the majority of the new real estate growth was in the residential segment alone. So having it be picked up by the industrial segment is a positive sign of the increased investment in the industrial portion of the city's tax base. Total real and personal property values increased by almost $227 million. And once again, the city's entire valuation is over $3 billion, which I haven't seen since I've gotten here, and I've been here for 5 years. So it's on the upward swing. The average single family properties assessment rose 7.6%. The average residential condo was in line with that at 7.7%. The average two-family property rose 11.4%. The average three-family property rose 11%. The average 4 to 8 unit residential property rose 10.4%. And the larger residential complexes over 8, so 9 and above, rose 7%. So we're seeing a strong rise in the values of the residential market. The income and market data for commercial property showed a 4.2% increase, and the industrial property had an increase of over 10% at 10.8%. The levy ceiling continues to increase faster than the levy, which is good. When I first got here, we were worried about hitting that 2.5%, which is you're banging the levy ceiling and you can't go beyond the 2.5%. So we're starting to see that space out a bit, which is good news. The trend in a more balanced increase in values across residential, commercial, industrial classes continues. The increase in new growth greater than the 3-year average was greater than the 3-year average for residential, commercial, and industrial classes. The real estate market, as Harald said, continues on its upward move due to low supply and high demand, and the interest rates are remaining low. There's not enough supply, so it's driving the market. As you know, coupled with low interest rates, we're starting to see sales numbers that we've never seen before. Several new projects this year that added significant new tax revenue. We had 2 solar panels in 2 large grow facilities that were repurposed older industrial buildings. Industrial growth continues due to the reinvestment in these older mill facilities, servicing the growing medical and recreational marijuana industry, doubling last year's figures alone. We've gotten over $6 million, an increase of $6 million in growth over what we got last year. Commercial reinvestment continues, but on a smaller scale. There were 15 new single homes built during fiscal 20. There's 8 new condominiums that are currently permitted and starting to be constructed. And there's a 20-unit apartment complex, which is under construction at this time. That was begun in fiscal year 20, but will be new growth for fiscal year 2022 rather, for next year. So, and the average single family tax bill continues to remain the lowest of any of the surrounding communities. One thing I want to make note of is on the sheet that I sent out that my office produced, it's the growth analysis by class. It's this sheet here. At the top on the left corner of it, it breaks down and you can see how the increases are in the commercial, industrial, residential, and personal property. And you'll see there that the industrial properties is mostly because of the city's willingness to allow for the investment or reinvestment in some of the older mill buildings, has brought a tremendous amount of growth at this point, that we're starting to finally realize with the newest state industry of the medical marijuana. So that's all I have for now. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Apologize, councilors. With this, I'm going to give Mayor DiNatale an opportunity to address the council before the councilors field any questions to our assessors team.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amidst all that we've gone through for the last 8 or 9 months, I dare say this is extraordinarily good news. These numbers, as Mr. Paquette has reported, I think are just really a trajectory that we should be proud of. And I want to say this to the council: the council's willingness to go to 0 last year has a great deal to do with where we are today. And I want to thank them, congratulate them on their forward-thinking approach to fiscal matters and government. And I think, again, this is good news. And I think, other than the fact that COVID is going to impact how we report these out next year, I dare say we're going to be seeing similar numbers, if not better, with some of the development that's going on where it hasn't broken ground yet, but Main Street is going to have a significant impact when we sit down to look over classification and tax hearing next year. So, and I want to thank Harald, his team, but even more importantly, our team at City Hall, particularly Chris Paquette and the folks in the assessor's office. So thank you. And again, good news, and please ask questions. Thank you.
With that, I want to open this up to members of the council for any questions of the assessors team. Council, keep in mind the hearing is still open. It needs to be closed before we can entertain any motion other than to close the hearing. Any councilors wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to Councilor Boschman. Councilor Boschman, you have the floor. I'm going to ask you to unmute here.
excuse me. On page 14, on 101, single-family homes. Chris said there was 15, according here, we got 14 built. And if you divide that into the number that they gave us, are you telling me that these homes sold for $500,000 a piece to get 6,908,96 of $7 million total for growth?
That would not be the average residential valuation. Are you referring to this document that I had circulated a week ago?
Yeah, Tuesday. I received it Thursday.
Okay, and which page are you referring to?
Page 14. Code 101. Single family homes. You got a
Yes.
5-year account?
So those are account totals. And I'm sorry, Councilor Bozeman, your question again?
My questions were, we built 14 brand new homes. And on page 21, single family homes total is $7 million. I'm rounding it off. If you divide that by those 15 new houses, that comes out to about $500,000 a piece. Did we sell those for $500,000? Did they sell for $500,000 in Fitchburg?
Well, those 15 sales would certainly not have sold for $500,000. I haven't. I'm trying to figure out how you're coming to that figure, Counselor.
If I may, Harald,
Yes.
on page 21, it's the 5-year new growth revenue history. So that's, Counselor, that's the new growth for all single family class. So that's anybody that built an addition or added a deck or a swimming pool or a garage, plus those new homes that are, it's something that wasn't there last year that's now included in our value this year.
Oh, okay. Well, we got you on here. I got more questions. On the overlay, I'd like to know when on page 27, because I noticed that we budget we balanced the budget by using overlay money. According to your chart, we have approximately almost $3 million in the overlay account. Is there a reason why we have so much money in the overlay account? And I didn't see it. I didn't see it on the budget. Doesn't show it on the budget. When I look underneath your pages, it says 700. If we take out $700,000 a year for the last 5-6 years, what it says here, the overlay balance availability is $3 million. Why? And we're going up on the taxes. Why have $3 million in that account?
Okay, if I might respond, the overlay balance stands at $2.8 million. Understand that there are accounts receivable, that is tax bills over the past years that have not been paid. And perhaps Ann might have some inkling as to how we stand with our tax delinquencies. But typically we want to keep some amount in reserve equivalent to not only standing appeals at the Appellate Tax Board, of which we have very few, but also tax receivables.
I just find it hard to believe that we got $3 million in the account. That's all I find. And I don't see it when they pass out the budget. None of us see it. So.
Counselor, if I may, this is the money that we have to have money in this account so that if people aren't paying their taxes and they go into tax title, we can cover those taxes. So it's basically a safety net. We also need to keep the money in that account so that should we end up going to court, we have money in the account should we lose a large case. So it's, again, a safety net.
I understand that, but if you go back to your page 29 and you look and you need, title, property vacancies and, which one is it? Tax title property, you only got like $700,000 in that account on, what the heck, 936. That's outstanding taxes on page 29. Am I reading that right?
Fitchburg tax title properties vacant, is that the line?
Yeah.
So
I don't
I'm
have the
sorry,
numbers
my
in
page,
front of me for what's outstanding, that I don't have those numbers in front of me right now.
nor do I.
I think our finance committee chair, Counselor Boishman, if you're willing, I'd like to defer to have Counselor Di Natale respond, who I believe has the figures in front of him.
It's, so there is the overlay surplus, and then there is the overlay of balance. Balance is 2.8 million. The overlay surplus that we see every year in the budget, about 700,000, that's the amount the assessors by a vote release it from the balance to the budget. They're not going to release the full 2.8 million. They're not going to release the full balance. They're going to release a part of it after they review the numbers, and they're confident that even after releasing the money to the budget, they have adequate funds available to withstand any challenges in court. So the 2.8 and the 700,000 are separate numbers, but the 700,000 was part of that 2.8. You could say it was 3.5 at the time, and they released some of it, but they're not going to release all of it. So that 700,000 gets released, goes to the budget to be used to be balanced, and the 2.8 is the balance. So you're not going to see it. You're not going to see that 2.8 on the budget sheet. It's not going to be there because the 2.8 is the remaining balance after the 700,000 is removed by a vote of the Board of Assessors. So I just wanted to clarify. You're not going to see.
May I ask the chair a question, the finance chair? Is it good practice that we take that money to balance our budget?
So, Counselor, I'm not going to have you direct questions between counselors for their commentary and opinion. You can ask questions of, and certainly Counselor Di Natale is on the speaker's list, and I'll let him kind of respond at the appropriate time. But we'll direct those questions to Harold and Christopher, and if there's further questions for our treasurer or auditor, they can.
Well, then I'd like to address the question to the auditor, because he's on the financial team.
Auditor Brooks, thank you. If you could respond, appreciate it.
Right, I think it's basically as has been expressed. The 2.8 million is what the overlay surplus, and we're using that to protect ourselves in case we lose potential tax revenue in any hearings, and it's also in case we have some what I would call bad debt. When we get to the end with personal property taxes, sometimes they become uncollectible and we have to write them off. So the dollar figure of 2.8 million is representing a reserve for basically uncollectible amounts. When we do the budget, we put in an overlay of 950,000, which is an amount within that one tax year that we expect to not collect or may have or want to reserve in case we have to abate some of the taxes. And the assessors generally have done 700,000 to the budget. So the net cost is 250,000, and that 250 is about what we issue each year in abatements and exemptions, regular abatements and exemptions. So the 2.8 is there as a reserve. It sometimes goes up or down a few thousand or tens of $1,000s, depending on a particular year and what we're perhaps writing off.
Is there a max that they can go to have a reserve? Is there a max, or is it the sky the limit?
I don't know that there's a maximum amount, but I think if we tried to pull too much, that the Department of Revenue and Division of Local Services would come after us and say, hey, you can't have an overlay on this year's budget of $10 million when you've historically done 950,000. So it's there, and then we can use it if we need to use it.
Phrased another way, Auditor Brooks, would it be fair to say that our the amounts that we keep there fall within standard municipal practice?
Yes, yes,
City
sir.
of Northwest. Thank you. Councilor Boschman, any further questions?
Yes, on probably Chris or Harold can answer this one. Breakdown of tax exempt properties, 917 on page 29. An estimated $204,000 appraised, about $204 million. Would they come out to about $4 million in taxes if they were on the books? The university?
Councilor Boschman, are you referring to page 29 breakdown of tax exempt properties?
Yes,
Okay, and which line specifically?
917.
917 Fitchburg State University.
Yep.
We have 40 properties on the tax rolls with a total valuation of 204 million.
Right.
And so your question, I'm sorry.
The question is, would that break down to about $4 million a year that we would receive in taxes if they were being taxed?
If they were being taxed, it would be $3.88 million in tax revenue.
So close to 4 million, yes.
Yeah, so what, just round it off to 4 million. I think it's time for the city of Fitchburg to start, in lieu of taxes, having the students go to the university for free. 250 students every year, and in lieu of taxes. My next question to you, Harold or Chris, you gave a chart of the vacant properties. And you had River Street on there. On page 24, major streets, the vacant property. The city invested approximately $3 million on River Street. What else can we do to improve the area to get this going? You got us at 55% vacancy rate on River Street. That comes out to about, for every 2 buildings, one's empty.
So if I could comment, the vacancy study that I completed this past summer relates primarily to commercial and industrial properties. We've all noted some substantial improvements that have been made in the apartment class, new properties that have come online. This vacancy study doesn't look at those residential classes, but is really looking more at the commercial and industrial.
Okay, all right. I guess that'd be it for me, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and Merry Christmas to both of you.
Well, thank you.
Next, we have Councilor Squalia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So just going off of Councilor Boschman's question about the overlay balance, do we have a desired balance for the reserve for our overlay balance account? Is 2.5 million, 2.8 million, is that our desired balance?
I'd defer to our colleague Calvin Brooks, but I don't know that we have an internal policy with regard to what that threshold should be.
Correct. Correct. I don't believe the city has any formal policy on what that number is. I think we've been that reserve was built up over time. And I think it's something that we're trying to maintain in the off chance if you had a major loss with a tax appeal, we could absorb it without having it affect the city from a budgetary standpoint.
So the 2.8 million is the number we're trying to maintain, but we've grown it over time. And like Councillor Bushman asked, is there a maximum? Is there a maximum amount that we are looking for this overlay budget reserve account? Or
I think it's more that we're just kind of keeping it even where it is, because if we're adding 950 in overlay each tax year, and then pulling out 700,000 as a surplus, which is a net 250 being put in there, but that 250 is consumed by abatements and exemptions, routine abatements and exemptions, then we're just, I don't want to say treading water because that makes it sound like we're just doing nothing. I think it's more that that's just how we're staying even that way. We have a good reserve. It's not
so
going
the goal
up.
with our to stay even.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I have a question for the assessors team. On page 17 of this FY21 report, what do the numbers on the left column represent? There's real estate trends. Let me get to the page.
Okay.
Page 17.
Page 17 and 18. Pages 17 and 18.
Yeah. Yeah, 17 and 18, there's real estate trends, and there's a number chart to the left, but it's not labeled.
Yes, so what you're seeing is a graphic representation of the real estate market for these subclasses of residential property. There's several techniques for measuring market trends. In this method, we're looking at the relationship of sales relative to assessed values over time. If on January 1, 2020, our valuations are at fair market value, what the curve or trend in before that 2020, January 2020 represents is property values relative to that January 1st date. So if, for example, we went back 10 years, we would see that property values are running about, we're running around 85% roughly of where they are today. You'll see also, for example, in the years following 2010, a downturn in values that coming out of the so-called Great Recession, and really took us almost 6 to 7 years before we started seeing recovery in residential property values. So the trend line is simply showing the relative market values as compared with the current value as of January 1, 2020.
Okay. In the future for these booklets, it would be nice to have some description of that there, and you know, just the number is this percentages, maybe just a quick little summary. You know, to sales relative over time.
Your suggestion noted.
Just to back up the tax classification hearing, we are talking about change the new tax rate for FY21 will be $19.03 for all property, residential, commercial, personal property, industrial.
If city council adopts a uniform tax rate, as you did last year, yes, that would be the estimated tax rate, $19.03.
Okay, great, thank you. Now I have a few comments. On the growth analysis by class additional document that we received from Chris Paquette, it notes the year FY 21-21, which is kind of far in the future. I think it should be FY 2021. And
You can feel free to direct by email any typographical and clerical errors. I certainly, we want to get those corrected in the future, but at the same time,
Oh, yeah, I'm
to go through
100 years ahead of the schedule, I guess. My bad.
So in our new FY 21 assessors report, I really appreciate having the vacancy statistics by street, as Councilor Boschman referenced on page 24 and I think 25, both by street and by property use type. I really appreciate having that information in the booklet. However, like last year, I had a concern that we didn't get the tax information booklet in enough time to really review it well. And I have that same concern this year. We got the tax classification booklet, only a few days ago. And so I would like to see that in advance so that we can look at it for much longer and review. However, the substance of the report this year, and same as last year, is really lacking in my opinion. This FY 21 report is 32 pages compared to in the past with our previous assessors. There were 75 pages, for example, in FY 19. And these are 75 pages that there's a lot of information, and there's a lot of similar information to this one, but there's a lot of additional information. Some of that additional information I would like to see addressed and available, because now this is not just for my knowledge. This is for also, it makes it easy for all of us counselors to relay this information to the residents. So in the past, we had right in the beginning a fiscal year tax rate summary, and it was very well done. It's the same format every year, so we are able to easily follow and track and easily explain to residents when they have questions to us. That was page 4 of FY 2019. So in FY 2019 and previously before that, there was lots of charts. And charts are great for us counselors, again, to be able to share this information with the public. In this new report, we have a lot of numbers and raw data. Having charts that are broken out for us so that we can share this information easily, really helpful for us. Another thing I'd like to see is the top 10 taxpayers list. That was on page 58 and 59 of our FY 19 booklet for reference. Revenue by source, page 61 of our FY 19. The budget breakdown, page 62 of FY 19. The cost of services per average single family assessment. These were little charts and they were very helpful. And that was page 63 of FY 19. And then finally, the motor vehicle excise report and receipts, which was on page 69 of FY 19. I would love to see, this new format, assessor's booklet that provided to us counselors, expanded to include these things and all the more information that we can add so that we can properly, relay this information with this residents and properly do our jobs. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Councilor Schultz. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor Kuchmarek. I had a comment, actually a question. It was stated earlier that our tax bills are less than some of the surrounding communities. I was wondering if you could, for the benefit of our taxpayers, how much less you estimate our tax bills are compared to the rest of the surrounding communities.
If you have your booklet, I'm sorry. If you have your booklet, on page 10 at the bottom, there's a chart comparing our average residential value and tax bill with the surrounding communities.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll take a look at that.
Next, we have Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your great presentation. I will speak for myself. I believe your packet is more than adequate, and it has allowed me to do my job just as good as it was in the old format. The residents of Fitchburg want to know in layman's terms what their bill's going to be. And when I presented the older packet in its full totality, most of them said to me, "Can you just give me the Cliff Notes? And, we'll look at it later." So you gave it to me in enough time. The format is fine. As far as I'm concerned, you can leave it as is. The overlay surplus discussion that was had earlier, you got to look at it. The question was asked, should we use it to balance the budget? I have argued for years that, perhaps we should not be using it to balance the budget, but then I'm hit with the question of, if you don't use the 700,000, where are you going to cut the 700,000? And the fact that the overlay surplus account has always been maintained, it's probably the only source of free cash I would say I'd feel the most comfortable using, but it's already been built into our baseline for decades. So if you don't want to have it in there, put $700,000 of cuts on the table. And we all know that's not going to happen. The news in this report, which has been greatly summarized, we need to identify and enhance to the public, because where residents will hard stop on is, what's my bill going to be? And believe me, that's probably the most important question in the document. What I try to do is not so much put a positive spin on it, but put it into the proper context. When your tax base is 79% residential, any increase in the tax levy is going to, you could say, disproportionately affect the resident side more in a single tax rate structure, because there's 79% of them versus 21% commercial industrial. So it's not that the city is hosing the residents, it's just because we're 79-21 split. When you have massive increases in valuations, as we have seen consistently since 2016, coupled with the 2.5% levy increase, you will see an increase. Now, I have been asked many times by people, well, don't raise the levy 2.5%. Again, back to my earlier comment, if you don't raise the levy 2.5%, where are the money coming from? And it goes back to this. So this meeting we're having tonight is in tandem with the budget hearings. The tax levy gets set during the budget. We just set the rate here. So when the budget is passed, the tax increase is built in. So what I try to explain to people is when your valuation goes up and the levy goes up, but the valuations on the residential side expand upon the commercial industrial, you're going to see an increase. So I just want to put into perspective fiscal year 2021's tax levy increase. The budget for the tax levy increase was $1,392,051. The increase in the pension, health insurance, and general insurance accounts was $1.1 million. So 79% of your increase, not your total bill, your increase is spoken for in those three accounts. And that has been the case for many years prior to today, and it'll be the case many years going forward, that 80% of your tax increase is funding those three items. And oh, by the way, number 4 would be MS4 stormwater maintenance, that we all know we're underfunding right now because, the feds came down on high and said, spend millions of dollars you don't have, we don't care. So that's why the tax levy gets raised every year. And anyone in a position of political authority who doesn't like that, put your cuts on the table, and it won't happen. So when we need additional money every year, it's not because we're sitting there doing a high five dance saying residents can afford it. We have unfunded liabilities that were built in 30, 40 years ago. So 80% of every dollar you see for an increase goes to those three accounts. And then I would argue the remaining 20%, you can say goes to stormwater. So those are the 4 things that it goes to. Doesn't go to added services, doesn't go to added benefits. It goes to those to pay our debts. So I want to just put that in proper context. But last thing I'll say is, when you look past the increase, which I know most of us will not do, home valuations are the highest they've been since 2016. Home valuations rose by 7.4% over last year and over 44% since 2016. The property taxation, last year's increase was $195 for the year. This year it would be $155 if we set the single tax rate. It's an increase, but as prior years have shown, it's an increase at a declining rate. So this year's increase is 20% less than last year's, which is a sign of the growth on the commercial industrial side, slowly having an effect. Yes, we don't want to see any increase, but we do want to see, if we're going to have an increase, that it's less and less every year. So I want to take a little bit of a victory lap on that end, that it's 20% less this year than last year. It would be $38.72 a quarter, $12.91 a month. And when I say these things, it'll be misconstrued that I think that it's wonderful we're raising taxes. I already explained why the taxes are being raised, and no one can offer an alternative to that scenario. And I want to put it in the right factual context that while it is an increase, it's declining. And we want to continue to decline it. So a 20% drop over last year is a big drop. And we have more work to do. So I'm optimistic on that front. But where I sat here 13, 10, 8 years ago, the increase was in the 250s, 300s. So we're slowly chipping away at this, where we can try to get it down to close to zero as possible. So it is a fantastic report that shows the city's continued growth. I mean, our revenue growth is the highest it's been in 6 years from this. So, and the fact that Chris mentioned the tax levy is dropping well below where the ceiling is, that's also great. I think it was in 2012, I don't remember the exact year, during the recession, our ceiling, we were only like 5 or 6 million away from the ceiling. Big trouble. Now we're like, what, I think it's like over 30 million now. We're way behind it right now, which is where you want to be. So you can't look at this report in total and not come away that this is another great news stories for the city from an economic development perspective, and the numbers tell the tale. And I will do my best to explain to the residents this whole meeting, as I've always done, because it's not easy to talk about. I have difficulty explaining it, and I know the residents will not be happy about any increase, but when you put it in those kinds of contexts, it paints a picture that where we are today is far better than where we were 5 or 6 years ago, and that is undeniable. So with that, I would like to thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Next, we have Councilor Zarella. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to briefly echo a few of Councilor Di Natale's comments on the report itself. Yes, we got this fairly late. We've had a pandemic this year. Everything has been slowed down. Everything has been impeded. There are, the courts are slowed down. The economy is slowed down. There's not a single industry where things have just been chugging along like they have in previous years. And also, I am also pleased with the current report as it stands. I think that when you're dealing with a summary report of this sort, an aggregated summary, less information can be better if it means that the salient key points are not overwhelmed by extraneous data. If we want to sort of data mine the assessor's files and statistics and so forth, I feel confident in stating that the assessor's office will be amenable to any such requests by individual councilors. I know because I've dealt with them consistently over the course of my time on the council, and they've always been accommodating. But when it comes to a summary report, part of the art of writing one is picking out which points are important to make. Because a data dump just obscures information more than it reveals. So I want to thank the assessors and also note that I will be strongly in favor of maintaining the 0% shift this year. Thank you.
Before we close the hearing, I do have one other counselor before I go to the members of the public. Counselor Fleming, the floor is yours.
I just want to make one comment about what Councilor Zarella just said about industries. No industry is booming. The building industry is booming like it was in the 80s. And that is a good thing for Fitchburg. So with that, I am done.
Thank you, Counselor Fleming. And I want to now we have one member of the public, a department head who asked for the opportunity to speak. And with that, I want to invite Ms. Mary Jo Bohart to provide comments to the council before we close the hearing. Good evening.
Good evening. And just for clarification, I am not a department head. I'm a division head, just for the public's sake. I just wanted to commend the council last year, the leadership you all showed. I know it's been a conscientious effort over several years to get to a 0% shift. And that was really quite an achievement. And I was hoping that we could maintain that 0% shift this year, thinking, of course, as I do about the business community. I don't need to tell you all how hard this year has been on businesses. I know it's also been hard on residents, but a lot of these businesses that we're hoping will survive because we're not done yet with the pandemic. And just knowing that the tax shift could maintain a unified rate would be really amazing. So I just wanted to say that, and also just to commend you all for what you've done to get us to this point.
Thank you, Ms. Bohart. Thank you for clarifying too. I appreciate that. And with that, I have a motion made by Councilor Di Natale and a second made by Councilor Walsh to hearing. And with that, if all have been heard, I now declare the hearing closed and the matter is now before the council.
Motion to set a shift of 0% for the upcoming fiscal year.
Second.
I have a motion and second to set a shift of 0% for FY21. With that, we will do this by roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
Yes.
Councilor Kucher,
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale,
Yes.
Councilor Fleming,
Yes.
Councilor Schultz,
Yes.
Councilor Squalia,
Yay.
Councilor Van Hazinga,
Yes.
Councilor Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
Unanimous, motion carries. And with that, that concludes this evening's agenda. Entertain a
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
a motion and second to adjourn. We'll do this by unanimous consent unless there is any objection. Before we close, I just want to thank our assessors team and members of the finance team who joined us this evening to provide answers and clarifications to councilors' questions. Thank you for all the hard work that went into this. I know this is not an easy task or a quick one, and I appreciate your expertise and your talents on this, and with it, wish you a wonderful holiday season. I have a motion and second to adjourn. Thank you, councilors. Have a good night, everyone. And the Legislative Affairs Committee meeting will begin momentarily.